Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the next wave of scaling up an automation program. And the way we're going to start off this is a little bit less conventional for this story. So I want you to think about if you've ever tried to do yoga, or maybe if you haven't done yoga, you've been into running or golf. But I'm going to stick to yoga because that's something that relates a little bit more to me. So when I first started doing yoga, one of the things that really stood out to me is I thought anyone could do this. So I went and took this class. I go in, and for the most part, I could do most of the moves. But I tell you, there's just some of them that a little more challenging than I expected. I found that I was holding my breath through some of them. I was counting the seconds until the next move, especially the more challenging ones. And you'll see this pose behind me. This one is called Half Moon, by the way. And it was the bane of my existence in a yoga class. I dreaded it every time. And I distinctly remember the moment, though, that an instructor came over. Her name was Sonia, by the way. And all she did is I was in this move. She took my shoulders and she gave this little twist. And then for my hip, she gave this little adjustment. And this move that I was just struggling through, I had this strong foundation. And it became something I just felt really balanced in. So why am I talking about yoga, right? Or why am I even saying think about running? Well, the whole principle here is that anyone could do yoga, anyone could do running, but also anyone could do RPA. Anyone could put in an automation program, but sometimes what it takes is having that little adjustment, that little shift of the shoulders, the adjustment of the hips, to have something that has a strong foundation and that is able to be scaled up to that next wave to feel like you're really in balance. So with that, I would like to bring to the stage Clemmy Malley, the Enterprise Automation Leader from NextEra Energy, to talk through her story. Please help me welcome her out here today. So Clemmy, can you start off and just give us a little bit about the journey you went on at NextEra for automation?
Of course. So we started our journey off in late 2016 when we selected UiPath as our RPA provider. And we were really aggressive out the gate. We wanted to show opportunity, build as many automations as possible. And we had quite a few failures from there, right? We stumbled a little bit. We had a couple of failed partnerships along the way. We had to redevelop a lot of our automations. And it just was rough, right? So last year, we had a couple of changes. We centralized into a centralized COE instead of a hybrid model that we started off with. A couple of changes were also instrumental. UiPath assigned us a customer success manager, and that's been really helpful. And we also had Cognizant approach us with the opportunity of having boots on the ground advisory that listened to us and was able to give us guidance and help us just tweak our operation model to be able to focus on the next wave of automation.
Thanks, Clemmy. And I think it would be really helpful for everyone is if we could talk through just some of those key actions that were taken to help that transition, those little tweaks that you talked about, so you could scale up your program.
Yeah, so one of the first areas that we focused on was our people. So we actually had UiPath come in and do a full training for our COE. We wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page when we started. And then the next area that we focused on was grouping our COE members into what we call squads. And those squads are aligned to groups of business units, so they're embedded, they learn the business units, they help drive ideation, they know the applications, and they're helping to just partner and focus on what's next. Another area that we focused on, we partnered with UiPath and with Cognizant to do workshops for all of our different organizational areas. We focused more with the workshops on managers. So we wanted them to really understand what RPA was, what they can do with it, what intelligent automation is. And out of those workshops, we had a lot of brainstorming sessions, and our pipeline was able to increase because of it. And then from there, those individuals were so we did automation champions or RPA champions, so those came out of the program where the managers would say, okay, I think I have individuals that would be good for automation. So those individuals are embedded within those organizations to help drive adoption, to help find the right use cases. So we have a day training that we partnered, again, with UiPath and Cognizant to come in, teach what RPA is, teach how to do the brainstorming within your organization. How do you find the right use cases? How do you think next steps? And really, that's just been instrumental.
That one, if we can just go a little bit deeper on it, because one of the things that really came out of that also was how you now connect all those opportunities that you're finding, and you're really creating more of an integrated solutions now within the enterprise. And the other thing that came out of this was this concept of microbots, which I know not only is your team excited about, but we have your CIO and CAO, so the Chief Accounting Officer, actually asking how many microbots are, and they look at an opportunity, they're actually saying, can we make a microbot out of this? Can you give a little bit more about this and maybe also explain what is a microbot?
Right. So to keep our people happy, right, we came up with a little bit of a challenge. We said reusable code is something that's important. So I had my team vote. They decided to call them microbots. So what they are reusable snippets of code that are specific to our applications that we can plug and play. And that's been instrumental in reducing our cycle time. And then I think what was
and some of those integrated solutions and how you're linking them now.
Right. So really now our focus is how do we partner with our AI teams? How do we look for more of the end-to-end? So those automation champions are looking for that opportunity, bubbling it back up into the COE. And then we're able to go within the COE to partner with our AI teams to find opportunity there.
The other big thing that really stood out is this focus on outcome management that we did. So we did two key things. The first was around how we're going to prioritize this work. And what we did is we sat down, as I mentioned earlier, their CIO and their Chief Accounting Officer are big supporters of their program. Additionally, every business unit across their enterprise has a senior leader that sits on their steering committee. And they got together with the automation program and they said, what are the key outcomes that we want to get through this program? We define them, we put them into a model, and we use that when all these opportunities come in. And what we're trying to do here is be able to ensure the program's achieving the outcomes that were desired when they put the program in place in the first place. But the other is it allows for this objective conversation on what work should we be putting in first? What should we be prioritizing? Where do we maybe need to add additional resources if we need to, or shift, so that we can make sure we're putting these solutions in place for the team? And then additionally what we did is we put in analytics. And we focused on a few key things here. First, which many of you are probably doing as well, is the operational health of these bots that are running in production. But the other thing is that we started to measure the performance of the automation program itself. We were able to know exactly how long does it take to get access, how long does it take to develop. We're able to look at that then and also be able to find the opportunities to be able to make things more efficient, make things run smoother, and to be able to move faster. Additionally, what we did is we gave the visibility back to the process owners and those business managers who now have these bots and digital workers a part of their team, so they could see the work that was being performed on behalf of them. And with that, you've been able to get quite a few outcomes. Would you want to maybe just share a few of them with everybody?
Sure. So some of the key things that we've been able to get out of this change, right, is now we're seeing $10 million annually in savings across the enterprise. So that's a pretty good number. And we expect that number to actually grow. I also touched on, with the workshops, we do brainstorming sessions. Our pipeline went from pretty much non-existent to now we have over 300 ideas for automation. Our automation champions as well, right? So we now have over 100 individuals across our enterprise who are trained to be these automation champions. So far this year, they've driven 30 automations to production with over $500,000 in savings. And the last key area really is, we touched on it a couple of times, but the cycle time. We've been able to reduce our cycle time by over 50% just with the reusable code and the standard changes, the training, and a lot of the stuff that we've talked about.
I think, Clemmy, too, one of the interesting things, we always talk a lot about the back office type of work, right? But you've actually been able to put a lot also into the core business of what you do. One of my favorites is around the bot that you guys created for hurricane season. Can you share a little bit about what that is doing for the teams?
Yeah, so this automation, so we're an energy company. So in power delivery, it's very important to make sure that our power is out and available. So we have a critical infrastructure pinging bot that we bring up during storm to make sure that it's that the power is going to be available to hospitals, nursing homes, and critical places that we want to make sure that we always have power. So it's been pretty awesome, right? We've had a lot of really cool ideas that are focused on really big picture and reusable code across the company. So,
thank you.
yeah.
And we want to make sure we just leave you with a few of the key takeaways from the journey that the team's been on at NextEra Energy. The first was the importance of that outcomes. Defining those up front was really critical. We know a lot of folks measure how many bots. We know savings almost always comes up. But I would challenge you to also think about what are those other type of benefits you can also get through automation. You can reduce defects. You can improve cycle time. You can close the books on time from a finance perspective. You can avoid having to potentially pay penalties in a process. You want to capture, monitor those. But also what's really important is about tracking it, measuring it, and not only holding others accountable, your partners, but also very importantly, self-reflecting on how can I also continue to improve myself and also the program. The second is around that creating the DNA within the organization. Implementing the technology side of this really isn't the challenging part, but it's about thinking about the people side of this and how do we find a way to educate them, bring them along this journey, create the awareness, and help them be a part of that creating of the actual solutions within the organization. And the last is around the operating model. Look, as you go and you put this process out, there's no special checklist or 29 steps to put in a COE that's going to make it work perfectly every single time. It's about knowing what you want to put in place, but then also looking at your organization. Figure out what works for your culture, what works for your team, how does your enterprise and organization work, and what do they need to be able to make themselves successful, and making those little shoulder adjustments and hip twists that we talked about earlier to really find that foundation and balance to get to that next wave for your organization and scale. And so also, because we wanted to bring this back a little bit to the story earlier, we're going to bring up this picture. This is Sonia. Sonia was the instructor we talked about earlier. Clemmy and I like to affectionately call this intelligent automation. Just kidding. Promise it's not quite that difficult as that pose. And if you guys want to talk more about it over lunch, we'd be happy to, or feel free to reach out to us. And thank you guys very much for your time. Clemmy, thank you so much for coming up here today and also sharing your story and NextEra's journey with everyone. Thank you guys.